Every year when UK theme parks open, it's the same story. Rides aren't ready, single train operations, and opening day chaos. But here's the thing, I was at Towers and Blackpool for opening weekends, and honestly, I had a great day. So I got me thinking, are theme parks not ready, or are we expecting too much? Right, let's be fair, people aren't making this up because there was quite a few things closed. We had no Battle Galleons, no Congo River Rapids, no Runaway Mine Train, no Valhalla, no Grand National. We also had a lot of things running on a single train. You had the big one, you had Infusion, you had Galactica, you had Big Dipper. So, there are definitely issues when these parks reopened. Now, I said it in my own vlog in Towers, I strongly recommend avoiding opening weekend unless you are an enthusiast, because on paper, everything I've said sounds terrible. Rides closed, terrible operations, all sorts of things, but it didn't impact me. I had a fantastic time. Now, for me, a huge part of that was socialising. Somebody said to me, you don't go to a theme park to socialise, you go to a pub for that. Well, I don't drink, so I ain't going to a pub. And the thing is, I was socialising with people all around the country. Friends, other channels, fans of the channel, etc. People from London, people from York, people from all over the shop. Not going to just randomly meet in a pub. Theme parks bring people together. So for me, that was a fantastic part of the opening weekend. But obviously there were issues. Right, so let's talk about some of the reasons for this then. I mean, one of the obvious ones is that they have new staff, right? Here in the UK, currently at least, we do not have any 365 parks. Our parks are seasonal, so that means whilst there will be some faces that you see year after year after year, there are a lot of new staff. And obviously, like any new job, they're still finding their feet. Now, clearly they will have been trained prior to opening day, but we've all been there with any job. You get taught how to do something, and it's not until the first time you actually experience it that you go, oh, okay. So, you've got to give these guys a little bit of space. They're doing their best. This is definitely not aimed at the staff. The other thing is the actual maintenance of these rides. I know many of you will already be aware of this, but some of you might not. When these parks are closed for 3 or 4 months, they're not sitting on their hands doing nothing. They literally have to strip every single ride right the way back to every nut and bolt, inspect it, check every bolt, every bearing. They do a thing called non-destructive testing, NDT, which is where they scan the ride to see if there's any cracks that can't be seen. And then they've got to put it all back together again with replacement parts, etc., get it back on the track, etc., and then test it. A lot of testing. So there is a ridiculous amount of work that needs to be carried out. And then you've got budget cuts. It is undeniable that all these parks are struggling financially. We all are struggling financially, let's be fair, right? Everything in the country is going through the roof. Cost of petrol, cost of energy, cost of food. That's impacting the parks as well, right? Staffing costs, taxes, all sorts of things are increasing, and they're having to make some tough choices. Now, they're never going to cut corners when it comes to safety. That is definitely not happening, but they might have to stagger some stuff. Right, let's get this open with one train, or let's open this a few months later. So there are definitely a number of issues here. And another one is, I kind of mentioned 3 water rides in there. You've got Valhalla, you've got Congo River Rapids, and you've got Battle Galleons. Let's be fair, British climate, who is wanting to get soaked first thing in the year? Not very many people. If you look on socials, you would see a very, very different story. There are a lot of people complaining about how bad opening weekend was. And I get everybody's experience will be different, depending on what rides you went on. Some people were on rides and they got evac'd and rides closed, or got to the front of the queue and then they got kicked out, all sorts of things. Totally understand that. In fact, if you look on the Daily Mail, they said that Alton Towers had their worst opening day since the 80s. I mean, it's the Daily Mail, so they're going to exaggerate, but the narrative online is that this was absolutely disastrous. I don't think it was. But the parks definitely could have handled this better, for sure. They are still charging pretty much full price for opening weekend. And let's be fair, it is a reduced offering. When you've got a couple of rides closed or there's no maintenance, etc., you should be reducing that offering. And from what I can tell, none of the parks were offering that. I'm a season pass holder to both of those parks, so I didn't have to pay specifically to enter. But looking at the price just now versus later on in the summer season, there's maybe £1 or £2 difference, if that. That's not really a reduced offering, and I kind of feel that would go a long way to meeting people's expectations of, oh, it's a little bit cheaper, okay, some things might not be open. That would definitely help. The staggered ride times thing, I mean, that is again a cost saving thing. You're not having to run the rides, so you're saving on energy, you're not going to pay staff. I kind of get it. The problem is, certainly in the case of Towers, when they did that, they didn't announce it until very last minute, and the place was heaving. So staggered ride openings on quieter days is fine because people will just, go to different parts and then eventually get to those rides that have opened later in the day. when your park is full, you kind of need everything running from the start. As I said, I mentioned this in my vlog at Towers many times, and I would strongly recommend, unless you are an enthusiast or you're aware of what the potential risks are when you go open a weekend, steer clear. Give them a couple of weeks or even a month or two to kind of get their bearings, because effectively this is kind of like a soft launch. And actually, the day after this video is supposed to go live, I will be in Drayton Manor for their big restart, and they actually say on the website exactly that. They're like, please bear with us, we're training some new staff, the rides haven't run all year, Christmas, etc. Like, they basically are very upfront and say, we are kind of still starting the park back up again, please bear with us, right? And I'm curious to see how that goes, because historically Drayton hasn't had the best throughputs and ops as it is. So I'm kind of curious to see how this goes, but at least they're being transparent with it, where other parks maybe have less so. Now, there are ways that some of the parks try to mitigate this a little bit. For example, Towers, the week before they opened, they had a buyout event. I think it was John Lewis. They usually kind of do it, they get the park to themselves. It's friends and family, so it's a much smaller crowd. It kind of gets the staff a little bit, how things are going to work and get the rides tested and stuff. But it's not the same as when it's at capacity. The same thing goes for Thorpe Park this weekend. I'm filming this. Yesterday was a press preview where the park was dead. Everything was like 5 minutes and people just sat on the rides and lapped them, which sounds like bliss. Today was the pass holder preview, so again, a little bit more people in the park, and I think that's kind of the thing. This is kind of like a soft launch for the park, right? They may have done this little trial run a little bit before they open to the public, but this is probably their first experience of a full crowd. And I know you're all going to sit there and go, these parks have been open for years, they should be used to it. They should. There's no denying that. They absolutely should. But at the same time, there's a lot of staff who've never experienced it firsthand. And they're having to deal with all these new issues that they've never seen or never experienced. Maybe they've kind of been trained on them, but then it's like, oh, crap, this is the first time this is happening. So just bear that in mind. If you are visiting for opening weekend, to expect it to be like the summer, everything open, fully ready, etc., it's probably unrealistic. And I am curious when Universal comes, because clearly that is intended to be a 365-day park. So that will be open all year round, and they won't have this problem. But it might force the other parks to rethink things a little bit. Now, if you look around the world, there are other ways that this is handled as well, because if you take Cedar Point, for example, massive park, beautiful park, went there last year, fantastic, definitely a bucket list park. They only open from May till October. Now, that is 3 months less than the UK parks typically operate. That gives them a much longer time to do that maintenance and get everything ready, so there's less chance of them opening with rides not available or single train operations, etc. Still going to have the same issue with staff, obviously, because, unless it's repeat staff, they've probably never experienced those things. But it does beg the question, would you rather have a shorter season with a less bumpy ride at the start, or what we have today, where they're kind of just finding their feet for the first month or so? I'd love to know, if you visited any of these parks for opening weekend, how your experience went, because we all had different experiences, and there's no right or wrong here. And what you think about this. Should the parks be opening later? Should it be a reduced price? As always, if you've enjoyed this one, hit that like button and do subscribe. I've been Chris, you've been watching Coaster Dad, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios. Every year when theme parks open, it's the same story. Rides not ready, single train operations, and something else. Every year when the theme parks open, it's the same story. There was also a lot of rides running on a single train. Infusion, big one. Galactica, something else. Big Dipper, there we go. Right, let's be fair, we're not making this one up, because, they. There was no Congo River Rapids, no Battle Galleons, no Runaway Mine Train, no